I sat in the room and cried a lot for you. Not because you left, but because you never looked back. I cried so silently. The walls absorbed every drop of pain you caused without you even noticing. I sat in that room hoping you'd come back, not to stay, just to explain why you left so quietly. My tears weren't loud, but they screamed your name until my soul stopped answering. I sat in that room full of memories and begged the silence to stop sounding like you. I cried not because you hurt me, but because I trusted you with parts of me I've never shown anyone. I sat in that room with your ghost and learned how painful it is to love someone who's alive but gone. I cried for hours not wanting you back, just wishing I never met you. I didn't cry because you left. I cried because I stayed after all the signs told me not to. That room became a graveyard for dreams we made together, and I cried over every broken promise. I cried for the version of you that loved. Ma, the one who never actually existed. I sat alone and rewrote every conversation, wondering which word pushed you away. My tears fell for the nights I defended you when you were already choosing someone else. I sat in the room you never entered and hoped you'd feel the ache through the walls. I cried not because I missed you, but because you moved on so easily while I shattered slowly. That room saw the worst of me, the unfiltered grief that came with loving you too deeply. I wept over the love I gave you, the loyalty you never returned, and the goodbye I never received. I sat there, holding memories like sharp glass, bleeding silently while pretending I was okay. I cried for the pieces of myself I handed over like gifts you never wanted. I stayed up crying, not needing closure, just wanting you to admit I mattered. That room held conversations I'll never have with you, full of everything I wish I'd said. I cried for the silence, because it sounded more like betrayal than peace. I sat in the same place where I once laughed with you and wondered how it all turned so cold. My tears weren't about the ending. They were about the lies that made the love feel real. I cried for the effort I gave to someone who treated me like a backup plan. That room became sacred, not for the memories, but for surviving the heartbreak. I didn't cry for you. I cried for the version of me that still believed in you. I cried for every moment. I begged for your attention while you gave it to someone else. I cried because I saw forever in you, and you saw a temporary thrill in me. That room became a therapist, listening to the pain you left behind in my chest. I cried for the time I wasted trying to make you love me when I didn't love myself. I cried because you turned the safest part of my heart into a battlefield. I sat and cried, wondering how love can feel so much like abandonment. I didn't want you back. I just wanted to unfeel everything. That room knew things about my heartbreak even I couldn't put into words. I cried for the peace I lost, trying to keep you comfortable. I cried for the version of love I created while you were pretending. I sat with my pain until it became a habit, a rhythm I couldn't break. I cried for the loyalty I gave while you entertained temporary distractions. That room was my sanctuary and my prison. It had every echo of your name. I cried for how long it took me to realize you never deserved the depth I gave. I cried because I wanted you to fight for me the way I fought for you. I sat in that room, surrounded by texts I never sent and feelings I never voiced. I cried over every moment you made me feel small, just so you would feel powerful. I didn't cry for the love I lost. I cried for the illusions I believed. That room has scars in the air, memories suspended like ghosts I can't exorcise. I cried for the confusion, how love turned into silence without warning. I cried because your goodbye wasn't a word, it was a slow disappearance. I sat in that room, hoping grief would turn into growth, but it kept repeating your name. I cried not to bring you back, but to let you go piece by painful piece. I cried because I loved you more than I loved myself, and you never noticed. I sat there, staring at the wall, hoping something would distract me from your absence. I cried for the part of me that still wonders if you ever truly cared. I cried because I never wanted forever. I just wanted honesty. That room heard the truth long before my heart accepted it. I cried for the boundaries I broke to keep someone who wouldn't even stay. I cried because my loyalty became my biggest regret. I sat in silence, hoping the tears would cleanse the ache you left behind. I cried for the strength it took to keep loving you while breaking inside. That room didn't need music. My sobs were enough to score the pain. I cried because every tear was a letter I never sent you, filled with all I wished you knew. I sat in that quiet room, realizing the hardest part wasn't losing you, but losing myself in you. My tears were the language of a heart that spoke too much and was never hurt. I cried for the dreams we built that crumbled when you turned away. I sat there, broken but hopeful, praying the pain would teach me how to love myself again. I cried for the days I smiled, pretending I was okay while you were already gone. I cried because the silence between us grew heavier than any fight. I sat in that room, feeling the weight of love turned cold and distant. My tears fell not just for you, but for the person I lost while loving you. I cried because sometimes love means holding on to memories even when the person has let go. I sat and cried, wondering if you ever realized how deeply you hurt me. My tears were song of goodbye, a melody only my heart could hear. I cried because loving you was a beautiful storm that left me shattered. I sat in that room, wishing I could erase the pain without erasing the love. I cried for the promises we made that were broken before they could be kept. My tears fell quietly because sometimes the deepest pain is too heavy for words. I sat and cried because the hardest love stories are the ones without endings. I cried because I gave you my all, but you only wanted parts of me. I cried for the nights spent wondering where I went wrong. I sat in that room with tears as my only company, learning how to let go. My tears were a silent farewell to a love that wasn't meant to last. I cried because I hoped you'd fight for us, but all I found was your absence. I sat and cried for the future we planned that will never come to be. I cried for the moments I held onto hope long after it had disappeared. My tears fell like rain, washing away the traces of a love that faded too soon. Sometimes loving someone means saying goodbye, even when your heart breaks. I sat in that room, shattered but healing, ready to find myself again. I cried for the love I thought was forever, but was only temporary. My tears were a testament to the strength it took to love and lose so deeply. I cried because I never stopped believing us, even when you did, and cried, hoping the pain would turn into wisdom someday. My tears spoke truths my voice couldn't, revealing the depth of my heartbreak. I cried because sometimes the most painful goodbyes are the ones never said. I sat in that room, lost in memories that still held your scent. My tears fell for the love I gave that was never truly returned. I cried for the pieces of my heart you took with you when you left. I sat and cried because the silence after you left was deafening. I cried because loving you taught me the true meaning of heartbreak. My tears were the last embrace my soul gave to a love that died. I cried for the moments I wished I could relive and do differently. I sat in that room, letting the tears flow freely, knowing healing was beginning. My tears were a river, carrying away the hurt and making room for hope. I cried because sometimes the hardest part of loving is knowing when to let go. I sat and cried for the love story that ended too soon but changed me forever. My tears told the story of a heart broken but brave enough to heal. I cried because I trusted you with my soul, and now I'm learning to trust myself again. I sat in that room, surrounded by memories, crying for love lost but never forgotten. My tears fell for the nights I held on to hope when all I should have held onto was myself. New beginnings. I cried because you taught me that love can hurt, but it can also heal. I sat in that room, crying for the love I had to let go to find myself. My tears fell quietly, a secret language of a heart, learning to love again. I cried because even in the pain, There was beauty in how deeply I loved. I sat and cried, not to weaken, but to find strength in my vulnerability. My tears were a mirror reflecting the love I lost and the strength I gained. I cried because loving you was worth every tear, every ache, and every sleepless night. I sat in that room, crying for the hope that someday love will be kind again. My tears washed away the past, making space for a future filled with love and light. I cried alone in that room, trying to convince myself that forgetting you was possible. I sat and cried because the hardest goodbye is the one left unsaid. My tears were proof that even the strongest hearts can break in silence. I cried for the love I thought was true, but turned out to be a beautiful lie. I sat in that room, drowning in memories that refused to fade no matter how much I cried. My tears whispered stories you'll never hear, about a heart that loved you beyond reason. I cried until my soul felt lighter, hoping each tear washed away a piece of the pain. I sat with my tears knowing they were the price of loving someone who never stayed. I cried for the moments when your smile felt like home, now just a ghost in that room. That room was filled with silence louder than any argument we ever had, and I cried for it. I cried not for what we had, but for what we had, but for what we lost, before it even began. I sat there crying, wishing you had fought for us the way I fought to hold on. My tears were a tribute to a love that burned bright but flickered too fast. I cried because the person I loved most became a stranger I couldn't recognize anymore. I sat in that empty room and realized sometimes the hardest part is loving someone who's already gone. I cried through the night, wondering how love could feel so deep yet end so cold. My tears fell for the promises we made that never survived the morning light. I sat and cried, hoping my pain would teach me how to heal without you. I cried because your absence became louder than your presence ever was. I cried for the love I gave freely and the silence I received in return. That room held my heartbreak like a secret it refused to share with anyone. I sat and cried because I believed in forever, while you only lived for today. My tears were a confession. Loving you was my greatest strength and my deepest weakness. I cried because I learned that some people only stay in your life to teach you how to let go. I sat there, crying, clutching onto memories that felt more like chains than comfort. I cried because you became the reason my heart learned to beat alone. I cried until the pain softened, but the emptiness stayed with me like a shadow. I sat in that room and realized crying was the only way my heart knew how to speak. I cried because I trusted you with my soul and was left with nothing but echoes. My tears were the only proof left that I cared when you didn't. I cried for every word I wanted to say, but was too afraid to speak. I cried because sometimes love means letting go, even when your heart screams to hold on. I cried for the times you said forever, but left me after a season. I sat and cried because losing you felt like losing a part of myself I'd never find again. My tears were a silent rebellion against the pain you caused, but never acknowledged. I cried because sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. I sat in that room, crying, hoping the pain would turn into a lesson, not a lifetime sentence. I cried because loving you taught me how to survive heartbreak, even when I thought I couldn't. I cried in the dark, knowing that the light you once brought was now gone forever. I sat and cried because healing starts with facing the pain you'd rather forget. My tears told a story of love loss and the courage to keep going. I cried for the nights I waited for you to come back, knowing deep down you never would. I cried because your silence spoke louder than any words ever could. I sat there, crying, learning that sometimes the only way to move forward is to feel the hurt fully. My tears were a testament to the strength it took to love someone who didn't love me back. I cried for the moments we shared that now only live in my memories. I sat in that room and cried because loving you was the hardest lesson I ever had to learn. I cried for the love that burned too bright and left me in ashes. My tears were the soundtrack to the goodbye you never gave me. I cried because sometimes the deepest pain hides behind the quietest sobs. I sat and cried because losing you felt like losing my place in the world. I cried for the love I believed in and the reality that broke me. My tears fell like rain, cleansing the wounds only time could heal. I cried because I loved you with everything I had, and that love changed me forever. I sat in that room, letting my tears flow freely, knowing it was the first step to healing. I cried for the person I was before I met you, the one I need to find again. I cried because sometimes the only way to heal is to let yourself break completely. I sat and cried, but with each tear, I felt a little stronger, a little more free. My tears told the story of a love lost, but also of a heart longing to beat again.